The only thing worse than fascism is discussions of what fascism actually is. Fascism is a complex and difficult to define ideology that is made up of many features. The word fascism is very common in politics, meaning you will probably have interacted with it a lot, and will have to interact with it a lot in the future. I have debated many fascists. Some of these fascists use completely opposed and different definitions. I rarely use the word fascism anymore because it always starts the most painful argument imaginable. Fascism is most useful colloquially to describe far-right-winger nationalist authoritarian populists who often command or adhere to something of a cult of personality. The definition of fascism includes many things, typically including far-right, nationalist, authoritarian, populist, cult of personality, violent and desperate for war, love of tradition, and then there is the economics. Every time I debate whether someone is a fascist or not, I prove they are 9 out of 10 parts of the definition. And then the same thing always comes up, the wretched economics. But he isn't a corporatist. But they don't believe in corporatism. My opponent, who is themselves often a self-proclaimed fascist, will snarl. In an academic sense, this is not necessarily incorrect. In an academic sense, comparatively few fit the definition. In a more colloquial sense, however, the definition becomes a little more broad and can be applied a lot more liberally. Nationalism, authoritarianism, conservatism, worship of tradition, cult of personality, and populist rhetoric are normally enough to make someone undeniably worthy of the label. Still, the label is evidently one of almost unique complexity in politics. Personally, I generally prefer to talk in terms of smaller, more easy to define labels, such as nationalism or authoritarianism. These things are far easier to define and therefore discuss. It takes 5 minutes to define them and then the discussion can begin. Even better, people normally use fairly similar definitions. When it comes to fascism, the whole discussion is often spent on defining what fascism actually is. Most of my debates with fascists have been spent entirely on defining what fascism actually is. When I debate nationalism, meanwhile, we decide what nationalism is almost instantly and can then get into the fun part of the discussion. If you take anything away from this video, it should be that you shouldn't waste too much time on semantic debates. Try to get to the point easily. Rather than debating whether fascism is good or not, debate whether nationalism is good or not, or whether authoritarianism is good or not. This is far more specific, and allows for a more productive and straight-to-the-point conversation or debate.